Welcome to the Menga podcast, your ultimate dose of vulnerability. So you know how we're always talking about cybersecurity and how important it is? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into a real-world example, a vulnerability that's making waves in the security community. It's got this catchy name, CVE 2024-47575, and it affects a tool called Fortinet FortiManager, which, believe it or not, is used by a ton of companies to manage their network security.
Yeah, it's like, you know how you have a control panel for your home security system? FortiManager is kind of like that, but for businesses and even bigger organizations, they use it to manage all those firewalls and other security devices, to keep their networks safe.
Right, so it's like a central command center for all things security, which makes sense. But here's the kicker. This vulnerability we're talking about, it basically gives attackers a back door, a way to sneak in and potentially take control. And the scariest part is, it doesn't even require any authentication.
Meaning, like, they don't need a username or a password or anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's like leaving the front door to your fortress wide open.
And that's exactly what makes CVE 2024-47575 so dangerous. It's been classified as a critical vulnerability with a severity score of, get this, 9.8 out of 10.
Whoa, so almost a perfect 10 on the danger scale.
Yeah.
That's pretty alarming.
Absolutely. It's like a hacker's dream come true. And to make matters worse, it was reportedly being exploited as a zero-day vulnerability.
A zero-day... Hold on, can you explain what that means for our listeners who might not be familiar with the term?
Sure, a zero-day vulnerability is basically a flaw in the software that's being actively exploited by attackers before the vendor, in this case Fortinet, even knows about it. So it's like being attacked with a weapon you didn't even know existed.
So it's like they're already inside the fortress before the alarm even goes off.
Pretty much. And that's what makes 0 days so dangerous. By the time the vendor releases a patch to fix the vulnerability, the attackers have already done their damage.
Okay, so we've got this critical vulnerability. It's a 0 day, and it affects a widely used security tool. Not a good combination. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What exactly is going on here? What makes this vulnerability tick?
All right, so technically speaking, the vulnerability lies in a component of FortiManager called the FGFMD daemon. You can think of it as a communication hub between FortiManager and all the firewalls it's managing.
Got it. So it's like the central switchboard.
Exactly. Now, there's a specific function in this daemon that's missing an authentication check.
Okay, so it's like a security checkpoint that's been left unmanned. Anyone can just waltz right through.
That's a great way to put it. And because of this missing check, attackers can send specially crafted requests to FortiManager, bypassing all security measures.
Tricking the system into thinking it's a legitimate request.
Yep, exactly. And once they're in, they can gain control of sensitive functions, potentially giving them access to the entire network.
So it's not just about stealing data. They could potentially take over the whole system.
Yeah, that's the scary part, yeah. It's like giving them the keys to the kingdom.
Okay, so let's talk about the impact then. What kind of damage can attackers do if they exploit this vulnerability? What are the real-world consequences?
Well, reports and analysis suggest that attackers are using CVE 2024-47575 to steal sensitive information. We're talking about things like IP addresses, device configurations, and even, get this, user credentials.
So usernames and passwords, the stuff that gives you access to everything.
Yep, the crown jewels. And remember, because FortiManager is used to manage multiple devices, the impact isn't limited to just one compromised system.
Right. We could be talking about an entire network being compromised.
Exactly. And think about it. This vulnerability could be especially devastating for managed service providers, those companies that manage IT infrastructure for a bunch of different clients.
Oh, right. Because if an MSP is compromised, it's not just their own network that's at risk.
It's all their clients' networks, too. We're talking about a potential domino effect with huge consequences.
That's a chilling thought. So let's say you're responsible for a network that uses FortiManager. How would you even know if you've been hit by this exploit? Are there any red flags, any telltale signs?
Absolutely. There are certain indicators of compromise, or IOCs, that can help you spot if this vulnerability has been exploited on your network. For instance, unusual entries in the FortiManager logs are a big giveaway.
So if something looks fishy in the logs, it's time to investigate.
Exactly. Another thing to watch out for is the appearance of a device named localhost connected to your FortiManager.
Localhost, isn't that usually your own machine?
Exactly. So seeing localhost popping up as a separate connected device would be highly suspicious, especially if you didn't initiate that connection.
Got it. So any unexpected devices, especially ones masquerading as something familiar, should raise a red flag.
Precisely. Other IOCs might include specific IP addresses known to be associated with attackers, or the sudden appearance of unusual files on the FortiManager server.
Okay, so keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. But with zero-day exploits, isn't it sometimes a case of the damage being done before you even realize there's a problem?
Unfortunately, yes. That's the nature of 0 days. Sometimes the first sign of a problem is a network that starts acting strangely, or data mysteriously disappearing.
Okay, so let's get to the part everyone's waiting for, the solutions. What can we do to protect ourselves from this vulnerability and others like it?
Well, the first and most crucial step is to update to the latest patched version of FortiManager immediately. Fortinet has released patches to fix this specific vulnerability, so that should be your top priority.
All right, folks, if you haven't already, drop everything and update your systems. Patching is king.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But patching is just the first line of defense. There are a number of other measures you can take to further secure your network and make it less attractive to attackers.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into those additional security measures.
Sounds good. But first, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to discuss how to bolster your network's defenses. All right, so one really effective tactic is to enable a setting called FGFM Deny Unknown.
FGFM Deny Unknown.
Okay, that sounds kind of tricky. What does it actually do?
Basically, it acts as a gatekeeper, It stops any device that has an unknown serial number from registering with your FortiManager.
Ah, I see. So it's all about verifying the identity of devices before letting them in.
Exactly. And remember how we were talking about those attackers using stolen certificates to register rogue devices? Well, this setting makes it a whole lot harder for them to pull that off.
Gotcha. So it's like having a VIP list at a club. Only those with the right credentials get through the door.
That's a great analogy. Now, another layer of protection you can add is to use a custom certificate, specifically for the communication between your FortiGate devices and FortiManager.
So instead of using a generic certificate that could be more easily compromised, you create a unique one just for your network. Precisely. It's like having a secret handshake that only your trusted devices know.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the FGFM Deny Unknown setting and the custom certificate. What other tricks do we have up our sleeve to lock down access?
Well, another good one is to whitelist the IP addresses of your legitimate FortiGate devices.
Whitelisting, meaning only those specific IP addresses are allowed to connect.
You got it. Think of it as a guest list for your network. Your IP address isn't on the list, you're not getting in.
I like that. So by implementing these additional security measures, we're basically building a fortress around our network, making it much harder for attackers to penetrate, even if they get their hands on a valid certificate.
Exactly. It's all about layering those security measures, making it as tough as possible for those bad actors to succeed.
Okay, so we've covered patching, enabling that FGFM Deny Unknown setting, using custom certificates, and whitelisting IP addresses. Those are some solid steps. But this whole incident really underscores something we talk about a lot: the importance of proactive security. We can't just sit around and wait for attacks to happen. We need to be out there anticipating them, being one step ahead.
Couldn't agree more. Proactive security means thinking like an attacker. Trying to identify potential weaknesses in your defenses before they do.
So regularly patching systems, using strong passwords, staying informed about the latest threats, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. But it also goes beyond just the technical stuff. It's about building a culture of security awareness within your organization.
Right, making sure everyone understands the importance of security and follows best practices. That human element can be the weakest link sometimes.
You said it. A single careless click on a phishing email or a weak, easily guessed password can completely undermine even the strongest security measures.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Fortinet's handling of this vulnerability disclosure. They initially warned some customers privately, but they didn't go public with the information for over a week, which sparked some debate in the security community. What are your thoughts on that approach? Should they have been more transparent from the get-go?
Well, it's a tricky situation for sure. There's always this tension between transparency, wanting to let everyone know about the threat so they can protect themselves, and responsibility. You don't want to tip off attackers before a patch is ready. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's a real catch-22. Early disclosure could give attackers a head start, but delaying it could leave some users vulnerable without even knowing it. How do you strike the right balance?
That's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer. There are valid arguments on both sides. Some people believe that transparency should always come first, that users have the right to know about threats as soon as possible, regardless of whether a patch is available.
But others would argue that disclosing a vulnerability before a patch is ready is like handing attackers a blueprint on how to exploit it, potentially making the situation even worse.
Right. It's a complex issue with no one-size-fits-all solution. Each situation requires careful consideration, taking into account the specific vulnerability, its potential impact, and the availability of mitigations.
So it's a judgment call, weighing the risks and benefits of early disclosure versus waiting for a patch.
Exactly. And ultimately, it comes down to what the vendor believes is the most responsible course of action to protect its users.
Okay, fair enough. But this whole situation raises some interesting questions about the ethics of vulnerability disclosure, doesn't it?
Definitely. It's something that the security community grapples with constantly.
How much information should be shared and when? It's a tough one.
It is, but it's an important conversation to have. Because at the end of the day, it's all about protecting users and minimizing the impact of these vulnerabilities.
And it's a reminder that security is an ongoing process, a journey, not a destination. We're constantly learning and adapting as new threats emerge.
Well said. And that's why it's so crucial to stay informed, stay vigilant, and always be one step ahead of the game.
So let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture here. CVE 2024-47575 is just one example, but it highlights some important lessons about the interconnected nature of our digital world. How a single flaw in one tool can have ripple effects across countless organizations, even those who don't directly use that tool.
Absolutely. And I think this incident really highlights the critical role managed service providers play in today's landscape. They're like the central nervous system for so many businesses' IT infrastructure.
Right, so if an MSP is compromised, the potential for widespread damage is huge.
Exactly. And that's a sobering thought.
It definitely emphasizes the shared responsibility we all have when it comes to security.
Couldn't agree more. We all need to do our part, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of the entire ecosystem.
And while understanding the technical details of these vulnerabilities is important, it's also crucial to remember the human factor.
Absolutely. Often, it's human error or a lack of awareness that opens the door for attackers.
No matter how strong your defenses are, a single careless click on a phishing email or a weak password can completely undermine everything.
So true. Investing in security training and creating a culture of security awareness within organizations is just as vital as having the latest security technologies in place.
It's all about creating that multi-layered approach to security, combining technology with human vigilance.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about being proactive, being aware, and being prepared.
So to wrap things up, CVE 2024-47575 serves as a potent reminder that even seemingly small software flaws can have major consequences. It really highlights the importance of proactive security measures, the ethical considerations surrounding vulnerability disclosure, and the ever-evolving nature of the cybersecurity landscape.
Well said. And it underscores that in our increasingly interconnected world, security is not just the responsibility of IT professionals, it's everyone's responsibility.
Remember, everyone, security is a journey, not a destination. Stay curious out